Hello, my Juicy Co-creators. Lilu here. I'm in London with Dr. Joe Dispenza.
It's pretty hot here, too.
It is hot, isn't it?
It is very hot.
London. I've never seen a London under that much heat.
But it's a bank holiday. Everybody's out. It's beautiful. The sun's out. People are out. It's really pretty. Yeah.
Yes. So you're here at this big conference. You're coming here on a regular basis in London. You're traveling all around the world. I mean, it's just your work is in expansion, I should say. Everybody wants to get a piece of Joe Dispenza these days. I don't even know how you fit all this in your schedule and how you're that much in shape and got so much energy.
Well, I think with all the great testimonials and all the great results we're getting, I think there's a movement taking place. And if we weren't seeing these kind of results, I probably wouldn't be doing this. But it's inspiring for us to keep the mission going.
Yeah. There's something very particular that happens in your workshop that I want to address or talk about today, because we've done several interviews, many interviews, and I get very often this question, and I'm quite intrigued by it, about those beings that seem to show up within your work. Who are they? How long have you been there?
Well, let's talk about how we could actually see them first, and then I'll talk about them, because I'm not the type of person that ever looks for them. I'm not the type of person that spends a lot of time trying to connect with beings. But think about this: the brain could only see equal to how it's wired. If there's no circuitry for patterns in the brain, then you don't see reality, right? It's called pattern recognition. So then how do we begin to see things that exist but we don't have the circuitry to perceive, right? In other words, we don't see things how they are. We see things how we are. Mm-hmm. So you spend the majority of your life narrowing your focus on everything material in this three-dimensional reality. You see objects, you see things, you see people, you see bodies, you see places, and our senses plug us into the three-dimensional reality. So everything that's known to us is wired in our thinking neocortex. So what we're seeing, and it's happened to me so many times, let's say you have a profound mystical experience. There's 4 states of consciousness. There's wakefulness, there's sleep, there's dreaming, and then there's the transcendental moment. Now that transcendental moment is something that we have been working to induce. In fact, we now know we can induce it. We've measured it. We know the pineal gland in certain areas of the brain become active, that the limbic brain all of a sudden moves into high frequencies. And a person has a full-on sensory experience without their senses. In other words, whatever's going on between their ears is more real than anything they've ever experienced before. So if your senses are heightened, right now, if everything you were seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, if your senses were heightened, your awareness of everything around you would be heightened as well. Well, awareness is consciousness, and you can't have consciousness without energy. So in a sense then, if a person has a transcendental experience and they start interacting with beings that are not physical, if they have that really profound experience, that experience is going to be logged in their brain, because experience enriches their brain, yes? Mm-hmm. The end product of an experience is an emotion, but you wouldn't feel fear from these beings. You would feel a kind of a love or a grace or a presence or an acceptance. And so then you wouldn't be intimidated or afraid of them. You wouldn't throw them into the box of some dogma or superstition. It's a profound moment where you're feeling such profound and intense love that you're leaning in and paying attention to the pictures in your mind. And in a sense, the stronger the emotion you feel from that inner event, the amount of gratitude or love or joy that you feel, the more you pay attention to the pictures in your mind. Now you're branding and embossing new circuitry in the brain. Now, what's the significance of that? Well, when you come back to your senses, to Lilu, now you can perceive a broader spectrum of reality, because you're going to begin to see things that have always existed, but you didn't have the circuitry to perceive them. Mm-hmm. So then, as we activate the pineal gland, it acts like a radio receiver, and those tiny little crystals, as we talked about in our last interview, begin to shimmer. And if a student or a person can begin to tune into energy and frequency, to know how to suppress the mechanism of the neocortex, the memory bank of the known self, to slow their brain waves down into theta, and in that state where the body's asleep and the mind is awake, and you can tune into frequencies and activate that system, that little pineal gland is going to hook into a frequency that's carrying information, and it's known as a transducer. which means it's like a radio antenna or a TV antenna. It's going to translate that frequency into profound imagery. That imagery then is not going to be anything that's known to you. It's going to be something that's outside the scale of known. So when a person comes back to their senses, they're going to perceive a broader spectrum of reality. So I guess about 5 or 6 years ago, I started sensing these presences in the room during our week-long events.
It started at the week-long events.
Well, it started at the 4.5-day workshops. I started, out of the corner of my eye, started perceiving certain things, primarily when we were doing the pineal gland meditations. At other meditations as well, but there was an energy in the room that I noticed, and they're very noble, and they're very interested in what we're doing.
Observing?
Many, many times in the beginning, they observe. They are along the walls, and they're not small. They're very, very tall.
How tall?
Most of them probably 3 meters, maybe more tall. I mean, they're beautiful and big, and they have this grace about them and this presence, and they're very interested. They observe. And when I started seeing them and perceiving them, I never really asked who they were. I just observed. And for me, when we do the pineal gland meditations, I'm up at 3 in the morning or 2:30 in the morning, and we're going, and everybody's sitting up and laying down, and I'm awake the entire time, and I'm working with the audience, and I start doing the meditations with my eyes closed while I'm doing it, and a lot of times I open my eyes and I'm in theta. The door between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind is wide open, and in a sense, I'm dreaming with my eyes open, and all of a sudden I start perceiving things. Well, when that started happening, people started reporting things back to me, and sometimes it was kind of cool because we started getting stories of 2 different people in a room of 1,000 people saying, I saw this incredible thing, and the other person saw the exact same thing. And I saw something very similar. I never said it, but all of a sudden you're starting to get a collective noticing something happening. Well, I was getting ready for the day at one of our events, and as I was waking up and moving around and I was between worlds, they started talking to me. And they said to me, we can only lower our frequency to a certain point. We can't lower our frequency anymore, our energy anymore, because we would change our consciousness. And we love ourselves too much to do that. But if you can raise the frequency of the audience to a higher frequency, we'll meet in that place where that energy intersects. And so there's an invitation or a door for them to move through or to exist as. And
do you think they've been supporting your work?
yeah, I don't know if they directly support my work, but I'll tell you that maybe the better word to use is they approve of it. And there would be like an older sister, an older brother that totally loves you and sees that you're really making an effort, you're making great strides, and they're just a little bit higher on the spiral, you know, in consciousness. And so now, fast forward to a few years later, I don't want to jinx this, you know, it's kind of funny because I don't really talk about it that much, but
it's great that you're opening up to this on that weekend because,
yeah, I mean, because
very interesting.
Because I'm more interested in making a new normal, right? And I would be a doubter if I didn't have those experiences. But now what's happening is that, and this happens kind of wild and inconsistent, and maybe we'll play a couple testimonials of people who have been healed by them, and they are sometimes very aggressive. I mean, very aggressive. Though, in one story, a woman had a severe problem with her hip and her knee, and while she was in the middle of a healing, this being grabbed her leg and shook it really hard, and kept shaking it until it released. And she was yelling in her mind, "Hey, do you know that hurts?" And just kept working it until finally it broke loose. And so I don't know how that happens, but the important point is that it is so real to the person, and that person's leg is up in the air, by the way, while this is going on. Whether it's real or not, if it's the person experiencing it in a lucid state, that it seems so real, then it is real. And the person has a dramatic change in their health. So just because we can't see something with our eyes doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You know, that in fact, this is happening more and more in our work. And what's happening, which is really cool, is that, and we've measured the energy in the room, as you know, so many times in our advanced events, that we are now have a kind of a momentum that's going on.
Yeah,
like
because the energy must have increased because you're getting better at sharing. I mean, your voice, your tonalities, how you put this, even the music and the surround sound system, everything is contributing, and the intensity of the people participating. I hear that more than 50% of each workshop have already attended a workshop. So that means you have a huge repeat, which the energy must increase each time.
Yeah. So we have right now, we just did the statistics on this. It fluctuates. You know, sometimes it's 50% are people that are first timers, and 50% of people that are just love. You know, they may have come 6 months ago or whatever, and they heard we're doing new things. And because our week-long events are always changing, the one we'll do in Niagara Falls next month will be very different than the one we've done just in Portland, Oregon, or Cancun. But it's super cool because there's a momentum that's taking place, and it used to be like the second or third day where people start breaking through. Now people are breaking through the first day, and now we got a lot of time to do a lot of cool things. And we are actually teaching our student body how to create the very energy in the room for the mystical, to create the very energy in the room for miracles, to create the very energy, to bring that energy to life with our awareness that heals. Because we are going to use that at the end of the week. So we practice all this open focus we've done, become aware of the space, of the room and space. Well, why have we been doing that? Because if we get good at this, then if you're not your body, you're just the awareness of you, and I got 1,500 people tuning into the energy that heals, in that energy, in that space of the room, and they're filling that room. That energy exists, but we have to bring it to life by paying attention to it or becoming aware of it. Just like you have a nose, and if you don't put any attention on it, it doesn't exist for you. But it's always been there. The moment you become aware of it, it exists for you. Well, the quantum field is the same exact way. So we're teaching
beings too.
Of course, because there's a frequency that's consistent with the mystical. And they're actually entering through that portal, through that.
You didn't ask them to come.
I know. Well, some now more, but I invite them. But
You do.
I always invite them, yes, but I don't need to invite them. So now we are seeing, as an example with our healings, we just did an evaluation. We have a physician that's a part of our team, and she's been collecting data with a few other of my leaders, and now we have 80% of the people that come to our events either have a mild, a moderate, or significant change in their health. And when I say significant, I mean complete remission. Now, 30% has a complete remission of a condition in 1 week. Now, that's a pretty good statistic, right? So how it happens, whether there's an interdimensional being that decides to appear and shake someone's leg or do something with that person, the important point is that the person is experiencing something outside of their known neurological network. Yeah. And when they come back to reality, how it happened to them is incidental. The major thing we see, Lilu, is how people feel. Right. In other words, people have a healing, and they're never saying, oh, I was blind and I can see, or I was deaf and I can hear. They spend 10 minutes going, I feel so amazing, I feel so whole, I feel so pure, I've never felt love like this in my life. They're talking, and by the way, yeah, I was deaf and now I can hear. You know, that's, or I was blind and I can see that. You know, oh yeah, let me just tell you what happens to my body as a result of it. So now all of a sudden it's not so much about the healing, right? It's about the emotional healing that takes place that actually is what's signaling the gene in the first place. So yeah, they are
But are they actually, did they change? Did the group got bigger? Is it, they're more and more loving, or actually, is there a way too that they could be changing? I mean, their energy could change and they could take over, or is that not at all that kind of group?
These beings are not at all like that. They're not at all like that. These beings are benevolent. They are beautiful. They are graceful. They are noble. They're beautiful, and you wouldn't want to tell them what to do. You wouldn't want to request anything from them. They move with such beauty and grace, and they're interested in certain people at certain times, and they know when it's the right time. So then you go to your physician the next day and you say, yeah, I had all these problems, and yeah, this interdimensional being did this thing to me, and I don't know, and now I'm better. Yeah, doctor doesn't care. All he cares about is you're better, right? And so whatever's happening in that world between wakefulness and sleep, in that transcendental moment, is the most important thing for the person. So they come back to life. They come back to their world, and now they're in a new body. They're in a new life, a new environment, and they're in a whole new time.
Could we say that those beings, or other actually civilization, if we could say, or extraterrestrial beings in other galaxies, are really there to want more and more these type of connection with all of us to support our growth, our evolution, and this is really a time of revelation, we can say, or there's never been a better time for them to show up and support our evolution?
Well, I don't know that they've not always been interested in the human race, but what I do know is the antithesis is also true. That if a person's in suffering, in guilt, in unworthiness, in shame, that's a different energy. And you attract different consciousnesses as a result of that, yeah? And now all of a sudden you, in a sense, have a parasite that's weakening the host, but not weakening enough that it destroys it, right? So you have that happens as well, and just because you have a body doesn't mean you don't have a body doesn't mean you're enlightened, So now you raise the frequency of a person's field, and now they're already there. They're everywhere, and they don't have to. There's a vibrational match. Let's just say that. So I think that when you get to those greater levels of love and you've moved past victimization or importance or control or need to be in power or whatever it is, that when you're at a different consciousness and it's selfless, you get a selfless reflection. And that selfless reflection is going to be a consciousness that doesn't necessarily live in three-dimensional reality, because once energy makes it here, you're no longer bound to the three-dimensional reality. You're connected to a field. So vibrational match, all of a sudden your energy's at that point, and there's a door. And now you're going to get somebody who's going to, in your state of emotional freedom, in your state of bliss or ecstasy or whatever it is, there's a perfect opportunity for a being that's vibrating at a similar frequency to begin to influence a person's future. But by the same means, if you can't get to that point and you're stuck, well, then there are beings that love to feed off emotions and feed off energy. And I've seen those too, because when a person finally gets beyond their suffering or whatever, they no longer can host on that person because they're no longer that emotion, that energy any longer. So then all of a sudden the person experiences a tremendous amount of freedom as well. And yeah, of course, now they're setting themselves up for something else.
How can we know that we're not stepping into something too big for ourselves? Like how could you know that at some point, creating bigger and bigger each time, there can't be a breaking point where something comes in that is a bit different than before? Do you ever, you know what I mean? Like the energy is so high, like we're all humans in the end. And they could be in any of our, like we're stepping more and more into our dreams, dreaming big and experiencing those things, and something else start to sneak in, or our own old personalities or our limitation as human beings can sneak in. And then the fall is very high. I'm thinking of the guy, that was in The Secret, always, that brought these people into this tent and into those insulations, and all of a sudden there was this drama that happened. So how can we know we're not pushing it too far, or we're not, and that other beings or other things are starting to come in? How good can it get, basically, until there's a fall?
Well, I don't know. What I do know, though, is that our intention really is to connect to the divine. Our intention is to become divine. Our intention is to open our hearts and trust again, to love again. Our intention is to teach our bodies emotionally what our future could feel like, to trade guilt and shame and resentment and jealousy and envy and competition for love. And we practice that in our week-long events. And once this center begins to open up, we're after coherence. Mm-hmm. So if you have a coherent heart and you're able to manage that and sustain the heart coherence, the field around your body begins to expand up to 3 meters wide. And that frequency, that coherent frequency, mm-hmm. is like a Wi-Fi signal. Mm-hmm. You got a signal now. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, once energy makes it to the heart and it goes to the brain, and you teach a person how to create a coherent brain, mm-hmm. and be able to suppress the mechanism of the thinking neocortex, the memory bank of the known self, teach a person how to operate from their limbic brain and tune that pineal gland into frequency and allow that pineal gland to lock into a frequency. Now you have a Wi-Fi signal as well, and it can read information. And these beings, I was doing this event in Florida, on Amelia Island. It was an advanced event, advanced follow-up. And this is people that have done advanced workshops, and the event was called Dreamtime, that we're up from 11 at night till 8 in the morning for the mystical. And if you don't want to do the mystical, don't come. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to be messing with your sleep. Mm-hmm. And I stay up the entire night. I'm watching the entire audience. And we're keeping them between worlds, between wakefulness and sleep in that theta realm. And many people have very profound transcendental experience. That's why we're doing it. And I was trying to think of a way to explain this to the audience. And I had just finished the morning. I hadn't done my meditation, so I went into my room, I sat up, I did my meditation, and then I laid down. And when I laid down, all of a sudden, I see this beautiful fractal pattern with my eyes closed in the room. And the moment I see that fractal pattern, I know that that's order, that's information, a packet, a standing wave of information. And I sense it, I see it with my eyes closed, and then it unfolds, like it rolls out, and this beautiful being is standing right next to me. And I'm sitting there with my eyes closed, and I say, oh shit, like holy, like, whoa. And I hear it laugh, and it sounds like a symphony, like a harmony. And it said to me while I was thinking about how to explain how we read frequencies like that fractal pattern. That's information. And it said, may I suggest a barcode? And I thought, while he said that or she said that, I said, what do you know about barcodes? Do you shop in a supermarket? And it laughed really loud. And as soon as I saw the barcode, I knew that the only way a barcode could be read is with a laser. Mm-hmm. And a laser is coherent light. Mm-hmm. And when you have that coherent heart and that coherent brain, now you're producing a very multidimensional signal. And now you can read that fractal. It's just information. It's coming from source, and it's slowing down into patterns. And your pineal gland is actually going to take that and transduce that into profound imagery. That's what it's going to do. So it's like a barcode. So then, as we begin to create more coherence in the brain, more coherence in the heart, you're creating a very profound laser, a Wi-Fi signal that can allow you to read information. You can't read it if you're separate. You can't read it if your brain's incoherent. You can't read it if your heart's incoherent. And so the more coherence and order you have, the more the experience gets enriched, because you can't read that information unless you're ready for it. That's the point. So as people start getting through this and they start having very profound moments, and they're now opening their heart, and they can sustain heart coherence, and they know how to create brain coherence. That's the formula. And now they have a laser. They have coherent light and information that can read information that exists beyond the senses. And the pineal gland, once activated, will transduce it into profound imagery. And whether you see it with your eyes open or your eyes closed, doesn't matter, because it's more real than anything you've ever experienced.
Did they share with you some formulas or some new ways of healing or some information that came to you, like really physically, that you're applying in your workshop these days, or is it just really observing?
We'll save that for another.
Come on, Joe.
Well, I'm certainly.
There's only the moment. There's only the present moment.
I hesitate to say, but let's say that I get a lot of downloads before an event, and I don't know a lot of times where they come from. A lot of times I do know where they come from. It doesn't matter to me. I'm not going to get caught up in the phenomenon. No. Because when you get caught up in the phenomenon, now you're trying to make it happen. I actually do the opposite. I love to be tired and silly. I like to be tired and happy. When my body is so tired that I can't even think anymore, but I'm kind of in between worlds, and I'm happy, I'm loose, and I'm free, and that's when I start gaining access to information. So I don't really judge how it comes. It doesn't matter to me. The fact is that if I'm getting it, I know that that's where we need to go. And
so you trust in the process.
I trust a lot. I trust a lot. So I'm not afraid of that. I'm not the type of person that ever talks about it. I never spent a lot of time thinking about it. But when I started to perceive it, I knew that I had to pay attention to it. And now it's not just me. And it's not people making stuff up. It's the people, as a result of their experience, have some type of change in their life, some type of change in their body, some type of change in their future. And they're just worthy at that moment. They are worthy to receive. And why? You stretch a person outside of the known. You take them on that journey, and they're going to go with you. And they're going to get beyond their fear, their pain, their past, their identity, all the things that keep us trapped in the same world. And we stretch people outside of that realm. And every time they step into the unknown and they realize it's safe, they relax a little bit more. And they're a little bit more happy with themselves. They're a little bit more in love with themselves. They're believing in themselves a little bit more. And all of a sudden now, they feel worthy. And the universe only gives us what we think we're worthy of receiving. So a person's in a state of grace and worthiness. Doors open. Like, let's show you. I mean, there's a lot of experiences right now between where we are in three-dimensional reality and our journey back to the zero-point field and singularity. And I would say that I would limit my experience of all those possibilities if I had a judgment on how I thought they would happen. So I just keep staying open. I keep practicing the formula.
As neutral as possible?
Yeah, I don't try. If they're sometimes, I don't really, if they're not there, I don't see them, then that's why I get what I get. Because I see other crazy things too that are pretty cool. So I'm not.
Like what? We want to hear about the crazy part.
Oh, geez. Well, it's those fractal patterns that I've come to love so much. And when I see or perceive those fractal patterns, these complex geometric patterns that are iterating, they're not static. They're alive. They're the very force of life. And the more orderly and the more complex they are, the more syntropy they have, the more I know it's coming from source. It's and the brain, the lungs, the kidneys, a fern leaf, a pine cone have the same patterns that are just an expression in three-dimensional reality. So think of source energy like the light bulb in the projector. Think of those patterns as a holographic pattern that then projects the hologram into three-dimensional reality. So seeing these fractal patterns then, seeing this beautiful mathematical patterns that are iterating and moving and changing, they're so fascinating that you can't not look at them.
So you look at them and you know what they mean at that moment and you remember, or you just be with it and it feels great to be with them?
I just observe. I don't try. If I try to make anything happen, it goes away. I just have to be aware of it and relax into it. And many people now, you know, when you see that fractal pattern, something's about to happen. You just know. And so we've used the kaleidoscope in our work, because in the beginning when I was seeing them, I would say they look like a kaleidoscope, changing and geometric and patterns and forms, and but they're alive, you know. And so I started researching, and I found that there's 4 states of matter. There's solids, there's liquids, there's gases, and the biggest, most abundant form of matter is what's called plasma. And plasma is when you have a negative charge and a positive charge, and they haven't formed an atom yet. So if you have a negative charge and a positive charge, then you're going to have an electrical current running between the two and a field around that current. And the universe, really, stars connect through plasma. Everything connects through plasma. So when you start seeing these complex patterns, it's an impression from that plasma that's being pressed into 3-dimensional reality. And so if you take 3 stones, right, and you drop them at the same time into a plate, and you freeze the water in the plate, and those 3 stones fall and they start producing concentric rings and they start interfering with each other, you're starting to get a complex pattern, right, of interference. If you take a light and you shine it through that frozen piece of matter, when you shine the light through it, when the light shines through it, the laser shines through it, you will see the appearance, a hologram of those 3 stones projected out into space. That's exactly how reality is. So then, reality then is a projection, right? And so then when you study matter, it's not matter that's emitting a field. It's actually those complex patterns that are creating matter. So then you don't change the tumor. The tumor is the effect of the pattern in the field. Change the field, you change matter. So teaching people how to do that, when they change the pattern in the field and it starts to appear as change in 3-dimensional reality, the illusion is everybody's been trying to change matter. And so it's not that. So
Exciting, yeah.
yeah, so it starts changing the way you see things, right? Because disease then is an incomplete pattern. It is a fractal pattern that's lost order, that's lost coherence, that's lost syntropy.
That is fragmented, can we say?
We could say it's broken down. It's disorderly. It's chaotic. You know, I don't know, you can use the example of Emoto's crystals as a good example. When you see gratitude, you see those beautiful geometric patterns. When you see anger, when you see pain, you see this weird pattern that's not solid, that's not coherent. So then why not practice brain and heart coherence? Because you're creating a lot of order out of disorder. And as you do that better and better, and you're functioning from a different consciousness, you'll begin to interact with information that's beyond your senses. Now, I don't know how to explain this, but it's the side effect of a change in energy. And all of a sudden now you're functioning from a different energy, a different frequency, a different level of mind. And now you have access to information that is transcendent of your senses. And I don't know if you see it, perceive it, it doesn't matter. But all of a sudden you realize, wow, there's more to reality than I've actually thought. So then when you see those patterns, you know that you're connecting to information. Just relax, because it's going to take you for a ride, and be ready, because it's not going to be anything you expect. If you can expect it, it's the known. It's going to be a little bit outside of the familiar. And many people, they'll say, oh, I want the unknown, you know, I'm excited about it. When it comes, they're like, whoa, I don't know if I like this, because you have one of 2 choices when it happens, and we've seen this on real-time brain scans. Person's having a transcendental moment, and it's so outside their understanding that they freeze, or they react, and they go from that theta brainwave pattern right into beta, and the event is over. They fell out of it. They're back in their neocortex. Other people, it starts to happen, and they drop into delta, or a low-level theta. They're surrendering. They're letting their body fully go. But their mind is, the energy in their brain is off the hook. but their body is resting and sound asleep. And now, in that moment, there's no impedance, there's no resistance from the body. They're trusting completely. Now that is the moment that we all wait for. It's just that a lot of people, when they finally have it, and I've done that in many of my meditations. It's so outside of the normal, it's too much. But then you come back and you say, damn, God, I want to do it again. Next time I'm going to surrender a little bit more. I'll let go a little bit more. Now you're back in the game.
Addictive?
No, very stimulating, very stimulating. And you know what happens? These
Encore et encore en français.
yeah, encore, exactly. and what happens is you can't stop thinking about it. You can't. You're not thinking about the news. You're not thinking about buying anything. You're not thinking about your friends. You're just running through this event over and over again and trying to make sense or meaning out of it. Now, this is an important process because as you contemplate the experience and you review it, you're broadening the neural circuitry in your brain. You have to say, what just happened? And so as you begin to review it, as you begin to repeat it, and you begin to experience it, and you start associating what's just happened to you, well, you keep firing and wiring those circuits, and then you start thinking about if it happened again, what you would do differently. Now you're priming your brain. You're installing the circuitry for the next experience. So you find yourself in your moments not thinking about Justin Bieber or whatever. You find yourself thinking about that whole uncommon moment, and your brain is preoccupied with the divine. And if you keep the divine on your mind long enough, you're going to become it sooner or later.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for your time here, and thank you for daring to do this interview here a bit different. I really, really appreciate that. I know you're onto so many things. Are you preparing a next book? I mean, what's the future like? Or you're just opening up to l'inconnu?
No, I mean, I always hold back from saying that I'm writing anything. We're publishing a bunch of papers now. We have a lot of physicians now and researchers that are going to be partnering with us in the next 6 months, 9 months, and we're going to be doing all kinds of wonderful measurements on our students. And again, measuring protein markers and measuring different proteinomes and actually showing what genes are regulating to kind of fill in the gaps along the way. So we got a lot of research ahead of us. We're publishing some really good papers. We're getting better at our coherence healings. I want to ultimately wind up in children's hospitals, children with different health conditions, and I want our data to be so good that we can say, just give us your children. We don't want anything. We'll never touch them. We just want to help. And if we're at 50% or better, because other people have been healing in this work, I think we're going to make a big difference in the world.
Super. Bravo, Joe. Merci beaucoup. Hope to see you soon in France, because it's always lovely to have you in our special country, especially around Bordeaux where we live, where there's all those great wines. And
I love going there. We had such a great time the last time we were together.
You're welcome there anytime, and we send you so much love from beautiful London. And please share this video, interesting video, different. This is going to run wild in the Joe's community and beyond. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Big kisses.
I've been asked to share my healing experience from the trip to Cancun with Dr. Joe just a few weeks ago. I did the advanced last year in Santa Fe, had a massive biological upgrade. Took me about 2 months to move through it, and everything in my life changed. A new business opportunity showed up, new income. I moved clear across the country. Everything in my life has changed. And so this time, I had some very specific issues that I've been dealing with that I thought, well, gosh, I may as well apply to be one of the Healy's because I could use some help. So when the application process came out and they sent the email out saying, would you like to be a Healy at the advanced week-long? I said, yes, I would. And I filled out the application because I've been suffering with a pretty strong arrhythmia in my heart for the last 6 or 7 years. I have really rapid heartbeats that sometimes really pound in my chest, and sometimes I skip heartbeats. And I've kind of managed it with supplements and diet and exercise, but it's progressively gotten worse over the years. And then I also have little precancerous things I've been dealing with for the last 10 years, because for the last 25 years, I've been swimming in the wild with dolphins and whales. And so I've been exposed to a lot of sun. And so those were my two issues that I wanted to have worked on in the session. And so I actually got chosen. I was privileged enough to be one of the Healy's, and thank you so much for that opportunity. And so during the week, Dr. Joe had been telling us about he's starting to see these 12 to 14 foot tall beings that are coming and standing around the room and observing us as we go into these deep states of meditation, because obviously we're stirring some things up in the quantum realm. And so he had been talking about that during the week. And so when it came to the first day of the coherence healing, I was in that first group. And the moment I walked into the room, the energy was so strong and so powerful, it almost knocked me over. And I started getting really woozy. And I actually had to have assistance moving over to my circle to lay down. And the moment my body hit the ground, my body started convulsing, and involuntarily, really, my arms were flying, my legs were flying, I was coming up off the ground, and I couldn't control it. And I knew it was just energy moving through my body from the amount of energy that gets awakened in that room. And as the healers sat down around me, I noticed that two of those beings, those light beings, those tall light beings, came and stood behind one of the healers, and then came into the circle and knelt at my feet. And one of the beings kind of sat behind the other. It was almost as if it was an apprentice. And the one being came to me and said, "Remember 15 years ago when you were skiing in Montana and you had that fall and you injured your left shoulder and you've had problems with it ever since? Well, we're going to start there and work on that." And I had not even thought about that, to be honest. I just learned to live with it. And so the being started lifting up my shoulder and kind of slamming it back down like that. And it started really hurting. And I said, "Oh my gosh, that really hurts." And the being said, "Don't worry. We have to bring the pain up to the surface so that we can pull it out of your body." And so about 10 more times of doing that in this intense pain, all of a sudden it completely stopped and there was absolutely no pain at all. And then the being said to me, "And now, remember when you were 23 years old and you came home from dance class that time and you had this intense pain? And unbeknownst to me at the time, I'd had an ectopic pregnancy and it ruptured on me and I was rushed to the emergency room and I almost died." And the being went on to say, "Well, when they did that surgery, they moved your intestines around and they didn't put them back properly. And ever since that time, I've had a lot of digestive issues and problems with elimination." They said, "So now we're going to go in and we're going to rearrange your intestines so that they lie in the manner into which they're supposed to." And I could actually feel all this movement in my lower abdominal area. And I was just trusting. And at this point, I'm just sobbing because this seems so magical and so incredible. And I feel so blessed to be able to have these experiences happening to me. I'm just sobbing. I'm just sobbing. And it's uncontrollable. So they finish with my intestines. And then the being says, "And now, remember, ever since 9/11, you've been having high anxiety whenever you travel. It's because your central nervous system never recalibrated after that experience. And they reached in, I don't know how else to say this, and I could feel the hand kind of walking along my spine and massaging all the nerves that run along my spine. And then they said, okay, now we're going to work on your heart. And I could feel the hands lift up my back so that my chest was arched up in the air like that. And I felt them pull on my heart and massage underneath the heart. And once that was finished, my body kind of laid back on the floor. And again, tears are pouring out of me. And then they said, okay, now we're going to work on your skin. And I could feel these hands of light caressing all of the skin of my body. And once they were done, they bowed and they backed up. And then, of course, Dr. Joe said, okay, now it's time. I don't even remember the words, but I knew that the healing was over, and the healers opened their eyes and began hugging each other. And I was a puddle of tears because something so powerful had happened. And since that time, I have not had one arrhythmia, not one, which was a very common occurrence. And my elimination has been absolutely perfect. And I've been very relaxed. In fact, probably a little too relaxed, but I know it's a process, and I'm allowing my body to rest and recalibrate from this healing. And the other thing that's happened is with my skin, I've had all these little, I don't like precancerous things, I'm supposing, have come up to the surface and scabbed over and fallen off. So a very amazing experience. And I've really been in this place of synchronicity and magic and allowing ever since this incredible healing. And so I hope this is really helpful for you, and you allow yourself for this healing to just move into you in whatever way it wants to, because whether you're the healy or the healer, we're all being healed because we're all in that quantum field. And I also want to just say thank you, Dr. Joe, because you are changing the world. We collectively are awakening to a new energetic field. And Dr. Joe, I just bow to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Kate. I attended the Sunshine Coast workshop in April 2019, and I was lucky enough to be invited in for some convergence healing as part of that workshop. I wanted to take some time to actually outline that healing session, sort of why I applied for it, how I experienced the healing, and then what the results have been since then. I applied because I have a very complicated medical history. And my results in more recent times have been getting worse. So I was hoping that the healing itself would either get rid of the conditions that I've got, or certainly improve them, take some steps towards improving them. And I'll be honest, right now, it's a little too soon to know whether that has had an effect or not. I'm still working with my medical team. We're looking at tests, we're looking at results, we're examining data, and I've undertaken to update Dr. Joe's support team if there should be some changes in my readings that they might be interested in. So that aside, what I do want to talk about is an unexpected healing, and that has to do with chronic pain. I've actually had chronic pain for about 5 years. I've lived with pain on a daily basis, shuffled along, got up in the mornings, been in pain, shuffled along, gone to bed in pain, not slept well, all of that, and never even entered my brain. It's such a habit. It never even entered my brain that I could ask for healing from it. So that was actually where the healing session went, unexpectedly. my history of chronic pain is I actually moved to my current town about 5 years ago. And when I was packing up my previous location and moving boxes and getting organised, I strained my lower back. And that injury has slowed me down a little in the last 5 years. So it's also impacted on my lower body in the sense that when I arrived in this town, I have a history of dancing for a hobby, and I knew that I could take up rock and roll dancing. There was a club up here I wanted to join. They did lessons and they did social dancing sort of several nights a week, and I wanted to be part of that. And it's a nice way of meeting new people and having fun at the same time. So I did all of that. And then I noticed, so that was 4 to 5 years ago, and then about 4 years ago I noticed the mechanical action of the rock and roll movement was starting to affect my lower body, in particular my left hip, my right knee and my left foot. About 2 years ago I just went, I can't deal with this anymore, something's got to give. So what actually gave was the dancing. I stopped dancing 2 years ago altogether. And I thought that it would improve my pain. But no, that didn't happen. The pain has continued even though I wasn't dancing. So going into the healing session, I knew the biggest issue for me was going to be receiving the healing. I'm not great at receiving. It's not what I do well as well. I'm really good at giving. I'm good at supporting people generously. I do that brilliantly. However, turning it on myself, not so good. So I knew I had to get my head straight before I went into the room for healing. And luckily we were given some time in another room where we were actually, Dr Joe did come and talk to us, and I had time to get my head straight for the healing. Underpinning all of that was a view that I really was unworthy, that there were other people more worthy of healing. And so I really had to sort that through. And I went, well, I'm committed to this. I'm here. I'm committed. I'm open to the experience. Let's see where this goes. So by the time I went into the room and joined my group of 8 beautiful souls, I lay on the floor as I was instructed, and I was ready. You know, whatever, bring it on. I knew I was safe. I knew it would be fine. So bring it on. If I started to feel overwhelmed, if I started to feel unworthy, I knew to just breathe and accept. So something new to try. The healing for me, and I get this doesn't happen to everyone, but for me almost straight away I had an entity come in. And I'm going to say entity. It was huge, 10 to 12 feet tall. He wasn't really interested in me. He was interested in my knee, and he literally, and I don't know if this happened literally, I forgot to ask the group, or whether it happened simply energetically, but he picked up my right knee with his left hand, and so my right calf and my right foot were dangling in the air, and he then started flicking the leg with some force up and out, and he just kept flicking. After about 4 or 5 flicks in my head, I did say, you do know that hurts, don't you? And he grunted. Lucky I speak grunt, because I understood that was a yes. And then he didn't miss a beat. He just kept flicking. And I said, you know that leg's attached to me, don't you? And again, got a grunt. And he kept going, and I lost count how many more flicks later. It was excruciatingly painful, and each flick even more painful than the last. And finally, after, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 flicks, whatever it was, I felt like the fascia in my leg suddenly unblocked, and I heard this crackle, 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 pop all the way down my leg. And I've got to say, the relief from the pain was unbelievable. It was pretty darn good. And I had a couple of minutes to enjoy that before he put 2 poles, one in each leg, so straight legs, parallel to each other. And I had another metal pole energetically placed through my pelvis. So it was like a H symbol. And he used that. My shoulders stayed on the floor, my head stayed on the floor, but my lower body started to twist to the right. And I had no idea you could twist a body that far. And he just used these poles to work like a leverage. And this traction started to go down my spine. I could feel it. And I just kept being twisted and twisted and twisted. And then suddenly I felt pop, crackle, crackle, crackle. So, and again, the relief was amazing. And he then went. That was it. The next bit was interesting. My group said afterwards what happened was my legs then went up into, when I finished turning to the right, I came back to center, and then my legs came up into the air, and it was like they were doing their own little private party dance. And a couple of people were a little bit concerned I might actually clock them on the head with my feet. But lucky, no one was damaged in this healing session. And then, really for me, I was lying in this centre of energy. It was just amazing. It would come up from my legs, through my body, and go around both sides of me through the circle. At the same time, I also felt it go above me and below me. But every time it came up through my feet, up through my body, and got repeated, and it built. It just, every time it went around the group, it got stronger. But came out of it, I got up from the floor, and there were hugs and, conversations about what everyone experienced. And when I was walking away from it, I realised that I had no pain in my left hip at all, and I had less pain in my right knee. I'd lost about 80 or 90% of the pain in my right knee, and I went, oh my God! What was left in both of those joints was a lot of stiffness, but no pain. Well, limited pain and no pain. My left foot still was in pain, and that did last for another week for the left foot. The other two, basically the pain went within a couple of days completely. So I am thrilled that I got put in for the healing. It's had this unexpected outcome for me. I'm sleeping well, I'm getting well, my stiffness has gone from 10 steps of pain to probably 2 to 3 steps of pain, and 3 steps of stiffness. But beyond that, everything is just extraordinary. I am so grateful.